The views and opinions expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated. Reproduction or dissemination other than for the purpose of education or information without the express written permission of the Phoenix Research Institute or Nova Society Media is strictly prohibited.
I'd like to welcome everyone back to the Nova Society. I'm Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, and I'm here with my guests, Dr. Scott Gershwer and Dr. Mark Bound. Today, our panel will once again be answering questions from our listeners. Our question today is from Jacques, who listens to the Nova Society from Creole, France, and I'm sure I have mispronounced that. I am sorry. Hala Thomas Datir, the president of Iceland, recently said, quote, "The pursuit of profit at the expense of the climate and well-being is no longer an option," unquote. What do you think the impact of a small country with a little global economic footprint making these statements has on the larger economic powerhouses and the G7?
Yeah.
What impact is this going to have?
But here's the thing. It's not just a small country. It's a small country that is blessed, I guess you would say, with geothermic heat up the wazoo, and doesn't really probably need any other kind of energy other than that. But the president of Iceland is a interesting woman and a smart business person. And I'm sure she understands that there's going to be minimal impact on the rest of the world as to what Iceland thinks, even as it disappears under the waves.
Yeah, and I would have to agree with that assessment. As Scott says, energy is not a problem in Iceland. They are not a economic powerhouse by any means.
Great tourist destination, from what I understand.
Absolutely beautiful. It's nice that a country like Iceland is saying something. As Scott said, I don't think that it'll have a great impact on any of the G7. I'm trying to think of what the biggest export from Iceland is. Would that be Häagen-Dazs ice cream? I don't know. I'm not really
herring?
Herring, maybe. I don't know.
Herring wine?
Could very well be. I mean, I can see why they're concerned, because even though they don't have an energy issue, they're still part of the planet. And, when you've got
island.
Well, it is, yeah. But they're still part of the planet.
Surrounded by rising seas. I'm sure it's a big concern. They've got a lot of ice that, melts.
That melts. And if herring is one of their main exports, I'm sure that the climate, it may be affecting their fishing. There's a lot of reasons for them to step up. And this is, again, one of those examples where they're not the ones causing this problem. And I think that was the point of the statement being made. We don't have anything to do with this. I don't think Iceland burns coal. I don't think Iceland contributes to greenhouse gases. I doubt that they contribute very much to pollution overall. And they're basically saying, hey, all you big guys, our little idyllic island, and it is, in some jeopardy. Can't blame her for saying it. But will it have an impact? Probably not. What I would say to Jacques in France is that, what did the French say about it? Did the French care? They're one of the G7. I mean, are the French going to change the way they do things? I don't know. But yeah, I don't see this being a thing. To be honest with you.
And look, the best thing that we can do, Joe Biden was good for the climate. Hopefully Kamala Harris will be good for the climate. Getting rid of people who deny that there's climate change, deny that 7 billion people on Earth can change the environment. That's really the key. I mean, we've just got to get the right people in leadership positions in places like the United States and China and India, and we can make some major changes to the way we do things. It's going to be it's going to happen more slowly than we had hoped. I think that's, you know, that's the answer to the question that Kamala Harris keeps seeming to get, which is, I think, a crazy thing. Like, why are you for fracking now when you were against it before? Well, I'll give you something from that on that. I wrote a bit about this not too long ago, that fracking technology has been used due to a pilot program started by Obama, but now bolstered by Joe Biden to tap into geothermic energy and use that to power plants instead of just fracking for the extraction of the gases that lay underneath the ground. And this is it is making money now for the first time, thanks to investment in it, and it will continue to be a boon in the future. Of course, not everybody has the same geothermic power as other places, right? And here in the United States, it tends to be further out west in places like Utah and Wyoming and so on. But around the world, there is geothermic energy that can be used to power plants, and this is a step in the right direction. And it's being done with fracking technology.
So, in order for anybody to pay any attention to Iceland, let's just say, or to pay any attention to any of the other island people whose homes are becoming deluged, what do you think would have to happen? I mean, would United States, for example, have to do something? Would a collaboration, for example, among Canada and Britain and the European Union be enough, even if, let's say, the worst comes to pass and we have a election denying president in 2024, so the United States does nothing and we wind up going backward in this country? Would that be enough?
No. What would be enough would be if you got to hit them in the pocketbook. And now it comes back to simple. Everything is driven by economics. So when you talk about the G7, everything is driven by the idea of economics. I'm sure that Iceland is not a huge trading partner to any one of the G7. I mean, they are not. They're probably a blip on their screen as far as this is concerned, as are many of the nations that might stand up and complain about the idea of the environment. They just don't. The G7 trades mostly with itself. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. It's relying on itself. And if Iceland said, "Listen, we're not going to accept your if you have this much production of greenhouse gases or whatever, contribute this much to global warming, we're not going to trade with you." I don't think the United States or any one of the G7 would care. I really don't. And it probably would hurt Iceland to do something like that. Again, I don't know what their import or export looks like as far as Iceland's concerned, but to the major nations with the money that they've got, no, it's not going to be an issue. Even if you were to take all those countries that are so disadvantaged and are so impacted by what's going on, I don't think you're going to see an awful lot of their trade. They're poor countries to begin with. Now, I'm not saying Iceland is a poor country. I'm just saying it's a country with not a huge population, that there's a lot of trade opportunities in Iceland for the United States, for the other members of the G7. The only way to get somebody to take a notice is if the G7 notices that there's a hit to their pocketbook, and the only one that can do that is another member of the G7. Because, like I say, we trade with each other. I mean, that's where the majority. China and the United States, the two biggest economies, trade more with each other than they do anybody else. Britain, France, Germany, they trade with each other. Yes, they do have some trade with Iceland? Probably. Is it significant in any way? Probably not. So you've got to that's where you've got to start. Somebody from the G7 has got to stand up. One or two of them. It'd be nice if it was China and the United States because they're the two largest. And that's it for that.
Thank you. And thank you both. And thank you to Jacques for the question. We will see you next time.
So that's all the time we have for today's episode. The Nova Society is a production of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our sponsors for this episode. BH Conflict Resolution Services, a full-service dispute resolution firm offering expert and cost-effective mediation services to couples, groups, and businesses. BHCRS can be reached at www.bhcrs.com. We'd also like to thank our podcast partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing partners, and Podkite, who does all of our analytics. iHeartRadio, where people get their music and podcasts, Apple iTunes, the largest source for music and podcasts on the internet, Spotify, the most popular source for the Nova Society. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms. We'd like to thank all of our listeners. Without you, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a comment, question, or would like to be a guest on the Nova Society, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. Always remember, the power of society is knowledge. So for Dr. Scott Gershwer, Dr. Priscilla Hobbs, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, and all of us here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Be well, and we hope to see you again next time.